Douglas Stevens.
Randy Scott.
John Hutchings.
Okay, we have a quorum. Everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? Any edits or alterations?
I was not here for that meeting, so I can abstain from voting.
And I wasn't here either.
I thought it was too. Okay. Okay.
I'll second.
Huggy with a motion. John with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Great. Any communications from the public that we have out there? Okay. Seeing as there's none, staff and board communications and disclosures.
Sorry. No, we don't have any.
I have a communication. I just got to tell you that I don't know if anybody had a chance to watch or experience the Daily West head frame being raised on attempted Thursday, but happened on Friday. It was amazing. And I honestly believe that just that will give us some momentum for other accomplishments that are on the list, getting higher priority. So it was pretty cool. Very well executed. So
I wasn't there, but I saw a video of it and I had chills.
yeah.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah. There'll be a full edited video to the whole thing, I think, coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'll find a way to get it circulated. So it was great. Good time for historic preservation. Okay, moving on. Let's go to the work session, small wireless facility design standards.
All right, good evening, board members. Rebecca Ward with the
Hi.
Planning Department. And we're back with small wireless facilities, which you reviewed in April of last year, but there have been some developments. And so joining us this evening, we have our city engineer, John Robertson. He is participating through Zoom and is not feeling well. So thank you to John for joining us, but he is going to attend and be available to answer any questions that are specific to engineering. And then we also have Toro Blanco. They're a design firm that have been drafting what these small wireless facilities might look like in the historic district. We have Zach Hodgkin, I think, also joining, who's available to answer questions. And just to start out, we wanted to say thank you to the wireless facility providers because they have come to the city and been open to meeting with staff, meeting with the city engineer. We did a tour on Main Street. They've been to the historic districts to try and brainstorm how these can be installed with minimal impacts. Also for what's proposed this evening, the State Historic Preservation Office has weighed in. We've reached out to the University of Utah. They have design guidelines to protect their historic President's Circle and Fort Douglas area, Ogden, Salt Lake City, and then many, many other communities who are trying to work through this. And what we found is it's still developing, things are progressing. We haven't found the magic solution, but we think it's heading in a good direction. So as I mentioned on April 7th, we did have that work session, and one of the big outcomes from that, we received a lot of good input from the board, and the board recommended that there be proportionate Main Street replacement lights that be provided for when the design standards were scheduled to go to City Council review. And those were completed. And as a result of those renderings, the City Council directed staff to continue working through those. They were not in favor of replacing the Main Street lights with lights that are shown here that would be much taller. They would have a much higher base, a much wider base. And so the City Council direction was to go back to the drawing board for the historic district specifically. On December 16th of last year, the City Council did adopt the design standards citywide except for the historic districts. And like I said, the wireless providers have continued to show good faith and work with us as we try to find creative solutions for these. So staff has been working with, the city engineer specifically has been working with a third party specializing in these designs. And what they have found is that in some communities, they are implementing a distributed antenna system, or DAS. This system is owned and operated by a third party, and the city would allow wireless providers to install conduit along Main Street. And because that conduit is underground, that is going to reduce the amount of equipment that's needed for each small wireless facility. So it would have an antenna as an addition to the Main Street light, but it would not require replacing the Main Street light. It would just be a kind of box added at the top. And then because the conduit is underground, it eliminates the need for the equipment boxes like in the base area. So there would be a minor increase to the base dimensions, but nothing like what we saw before. Toro Blanco did some renderings, imagining what these might look like, and we're still working out the dimensions of the antennas, but in the worst case scenario, this is an existing Main Street light. And this is what the antenna extension would look like. So it would match in materials and color. And then it would be a worst case scenario, it would be 15 inches in height, for about 14 inches in length, and 6 inches in width. And there may be an opportunity to reduce that further. This is another image from Toro Blanco showing what the addition would look like. So the proposed design standards would require the DAS system for the Main Street small wireless facilities. But then for all of those small wireless facilities that are proposed in historic districts or near historic sites, we then have a separate section that would be proposed to be adopted as part of the design standards. And this would require the small wireless provider to demonstrate that unless they install something in the historic district or near a historic site, adequate coverage cannot be maintained, existing services or capacity cannot be improved, or new services cannot be added to the existing facilities unless they do install these facilities. The second thing would be to require a comprehensive plan for complete coverage of the historic district, to identify opportunities for co-location and also to reduce the number of these that are installed. The proposed design standards establish an optional pre-submittal meeting, and then establish public notice for the Section 106 review that happens with the State Historic Preservation Office, so that the city and the public who's interested can participate as consulting parties. And then there's a prioritization for small wireless facilities in historic districts where, again, these would be the ones installed away from Main Street. And the first would be on-strand attachments. These are shown in the image here, which is where the small wireless facility just kind of hangs below the power line here. The next would be a small wireless facility that's attached to an existing utility pole, shown in the image here, which is taken from the design standards. Traffic signals, while there aren't any in the historic district, there are some historic sites that are near traffic signals. And so because of their size, it's the equipment can be concealed fairly easily. So that would be the third preference. And then street lights, excluding those on Main Street, where replacements would be allowed that are within the existing street lights for that streetscape. Then the last would be unobtrusive co-location or a monopole, a standalone pole. That would be as a last resort. The proposed design standards prohibit small wireless facility installations on historic structures or sites. They're prohibited along the primary facade or lot frontage of historic sites. They're discouraged from canopies, awnings, overhangs, balconies, and rooftops. And then damage, historic material would need to be protected during installation if one is near a historic site. The proposed design standards also require screening, concealment, camouflage, or other stealth techniques, blending into the environment, integration with the environment, and undergrounding of utility boxes whenever possible. And so what we are asking for is any input that you have for, these are scheduled to go to City Council in September. And again, the design standards for small wireless facilities, they're already adopted. This would just be the addition of a chapter specific to the historic districts and near historic sites. So that's all I have. But as I mentioned, we have John Robertson joining us, the city engineer, for any questions.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, the packet was really clear. Thanks for the overview. Are there questions from the board that need to be answered? Or do you have some opinions of the different versions there?
Well, I always have an opinion, so you shouldn't have asked me. No, my first question is there already existing conduit in Main Street that they'll be running this in, or will this sidewalk need to be torn up?
I believe it's existing.
Okay.
And let's see if John can confirm.
Yes, good afternoon, board. I appreciate being on. John Robertson, city engineer. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but it's probably better for you if I'm not there in person. So if there is existing conduit that was placed in a large portion of Main Street when they redid the sidewalks 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more than that. The conduit was placed by the city. We would have to get into some form of agreement with providers to be able to use that because the city did install it and does maintain it. So we'd have to enter into some agreement, but it's definitely there as an opportunity for them to use that should we need to.
And if you don't mind, I think one of the things when we spoke about this before, I guess it was last year, it seemed like we didn't need too many of these on Main Street, just one or two or three. And I'm or what?
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Why? I don't know. This was early on in the discussions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the challenge or the advantages of the DAS system is current Utah state law allows multiple providers to come into Main Street and come into city right-of-ways to place their facilities. Excuse me, which could be, if we didn't have the DAS system in place, it could be that they could go and place their facilities up and down Main Street. So we're looking at AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, et cetera, could place their facilities in there. The advantage of the DAS is that it is one antenna that there might be antennas placed on multiple poles, but as you can see, it's a lot less intrusive, I should say. It is on top, it will be noticeable, but it would be less intrusive. And you can have multiple providers using that one antenna, which there's an advantage to that because now you can force placement in certain locations and or it's just not as intrusive, I should say. I do want to clarify real quick. So state law does not allow us to force people onto the DAS. We see it as definitely an advantage for them. But they could come in and propose other locations in the historic district. And if they didn't want to use the DAS, they could do that, though we could strive to encourage and really promote. And we think the DAS provides a lot of opportunities and savings for them. But that's something that, we have, some of that was taken out of our control a little bit by the state law passage.
So the only thing I was just wondering, that may not be a practical thought, but is, you notice something on a street light because it's different than the two street lights next to it on Main Street. And so there are some opportunities that were brought up in the staff report about, having these poles located in, like at the top of Main Street. And I know, John, we were talking the other day about, the possible improvements at the top of Main Street. There's also the bottom of Main Street at the turnaround, a couple of different parks and public areas. If there were poles in those areas, they could be different than what's being proposed on Main Street.
True. Yeah, we could place a standalone monopole there, or they could propose one there. They could.
So I guess I'm just maybe thinking is maybe we should have another design alternative for those kind of areas that would be maybe smaller, not necessarily trying to light up the street the way the street lights do,
Right.
but are just trying to light up a smaller. So I think we just need to add another design opportunity if it turns out that might be a better option. For
Okay.
this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I heard the answer to the question. Would this retrofit go on every pole? It sounds like
No,
No.
It could, I should say, but it won't have to go on every pole. It really kind of depends on the provider coverage that they're looking for.
I see.
So
Okay.
it might be that we can place 3 or 4 antennas up and down Main Street that provides a significant amount of coverage for a lot of different providers. So it's just, we have to talk with each provider. They have to look at the coverages and where they're missing some spots and some other things.
Okay.
So it kind of depends.
It's coverage dependent. Yep.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
I do like that, the concept actually, in some of these high use areas where I think a monopole could be potentially hidden,
Yeah.
it could just go in its own spot. That could be an interesting solution actually, but
Well, then you don't notice it on a pole.
Right.
Because it looks different.
yeah.
But don't you think that would pull away from the historic image? I mean,
Having,
I see literally hundreds of people a week standing in the middle of the street, just doing a selfie of themselves on Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
having them on the poles on Main Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's why I think it would be better if we could have them not even, if we're going to keep the poles that are on the street already, let's not alter them.
No, you were saying the monopole. I just don't think that would be appropriate on Main Street.
Well, I think the only thing I was getting at, and that's where the design guidelines would come in. It could look just like one of the other historic poles. It just wouldn't be quite the same. It wouldn't necessarily have to produce the same amount of light, but it could be a different design that would fit in. And if it could be in a place, if there's one at the bottom of Main Street, near the very bottom of Lower Main Street, or one up near the Brew Pub lot, they could maybe be placed in locations that are more hidden from view, or back into the Miners Park where you don't see it.
Yeah,
No,
off the sidewalk.
That would be my concern.
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people.
Oh, I know.
And then they all know where the Chamber of Commerce website is, so that you frequently see them hanging moons there.
Yeah.
And if I can describe what happened after the last meeting, the last work session, where the board recommended that with the different rights of way, the different little park areas that we have running through Main Street, we did create a map of those and then reviewed those with the wireless providers. And they were expressing concerns, or I guess it's if you set the wireless facility behind the structure or to a side of a structure, then additional issues come in where it's increased height
Okay.
and things along those lines. So there are opportunities for, like, the DAS system would have it's like a 10 by 10 kind of operating system that could be hidden on rooftops or in these rights of ways off of the Main Street area. But to actually do the small wireless facilities in those areas, they expressed some concern that wouldn't be possible
I'd like
without
to
additional height.
say a few words in favor of the new design. I looked at it and I felt that our concerns about the light poles were heard. And I think that the small protrusion up at the top for the extra antenna or whatever it is, didn't detract at all from the light pole. For me, just looking at it in a drawing, and I felt that no, I really don't think people are going to notice it that much. And they're gonna be so happy with their cell phone reception and looking up when the next lecture is at the Park City Museum, that I think that, I think they did a great job, and I'm particularly pleased about the smaller base.
Yep.
And the whole conduit thing. So,
Mhm.
from a design standpoint, and as some of you know, I do have an art background. I was very happy with the changes.
Same here.
Yep, agreed. Of all the designs out there, I really appreciate that keeping the base really similar to the same size that it was. That's the primary issue there. So yeah, I'm in favor of that last design as well.
Do we need to have removal provisions in here? Like if the facilities are abandoned or not used anymore, or
Yeah, so when the council adopted the design standards, they also adopted a section of code that outlines the agreement that's required to operate these in the right of way, and that addresses
That's
all
part
of
of it.
those.
Got
Mhm. Okay, is there anything else? No? Okay, thank you very much for your input, and we'll be sure to convey that when we go to council in September.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving to the next item, correct?
Before we move on to the next item, I believe there was a chat that popped up.
Yeah, I just saw that, and I only
Is,
was able to read the first 10 words. So.
what? Oh, okay. But was it? Yeah, just so that everyone, because I'm not sure they all saw it.
Okay, the comments were from Zach with the design firm. He says monopoles can be part of the DAS system. The real advantage of the DAS system is to ensure a multi-tenant collection of the carriers instead of the carriers each having their own individual poles, which would lead to 3 to 4 times as many installations over time. And then he said this size installation and DAS system calls for a total of 10 nodes along Main Street that will enable complete coverage for every carrier along that street.
10 calls along Main Street. So that's really the bottom line there.
Mhm.
Which, the Main Street's pretty long, so you know, there.
Yep.
10 poles sounds good to me.
Great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, 1304 Park Avenue.
We actually, right before that, there should be a resolution to adopt for hybrid meetings.
You're right. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So I have a digital copy of the resolution on my screen. Essentially, this is a resolution that we are required to adopt in order to hold hybrid meetings. So if we want to continue to meet in person and online and allow for participation in both realms, the board just needs to vote to adopt this resolution.
It's okay to me.
I have no problem adopting it at all.
I think we just need a motion.
Move we
I
adopt.
think it's more of a formality.
Okay.
I'm just wondering for the public record, do you think we need to read the resolution? It's right now on the screen.
Yes, that could be helpful.
Yeah, just since we don't have legal representation, why don't I just read this for the record
Okay,
and then we can adopt it?
great.
Okay, so this is a resolution governing the use of electronic meetings by the Historic Preservation Board. Whereas Park City values transparency in conducting the public's business in public meetings where actions are taken and deliberations are conducted openly. Whereas the preference is for Park City public bodies to convene in person, it is understood that there may be circumstances where electronic meetings are necessary. Whereas the Open and Public Meetings Act was amended during the 2021 general session to grant additional flexibility in how public bodies conduct electronic meetings. Whereas the COVID-19 virus continues to raise health or safety concerns for in-person public meetings and electronic meetings help facilitate social distancing, be it ordained by the Historic Preservation Board of Park City, Utah, that the Historic Preservation Board may hold electronic meetings in accordance with Section 52(4), and Spencer, if you can go up the screen. 52-4-207 of the Utah Code as amended.
I move we adopt this resolution.
I'll second.
Okay, Puggy with the motion and Lola with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Great. All right, now moving forward to 1304 Park Avenue.
Just a quick comment. I was amused that this was touched on our minutes, in our minutes for the last meeting. This house, 1304, was discussed in our last minutes.
Yes, so as Puggy stated, 1304 Park Avenue was previously came before the board for a proposal of full panelization of the historic structure. And tonight they are coming back with a revised proposal to only panelize 4 walls from the 1941 or pre-1941 addition to the structure and lift the walls of the original structure. So my presentation will go into this in a bit more detail. The existing home, the original structure, was constructed on 1304 Park Avenue in circa 1885 and is currently a landmark historic structure on Park City's historic sites inventory. Here's a 1941 Summit County tax photograph of the single family home. Tonight, the applicant is proposing the disassembly and reassembly or panelization of 4 walls of the 1941 addition and to lift the original form of the historic structure. In this slide, as well as in the packet, we have the drawings from the project's architect, John DeGray, who is here with us tonight. These drawings show the panelization plan. So here on the front elevation, you can see panel B, then the historic form to be lifted. Panel C, the historic form to be lifted. Panel D, and panel A. After the Historic Preservation Board previously reviewed the proposal for the full panelization and denied that request, the applicant has provided a letter, which is included as Exhibit B in the packet, stating that they believe lifting the structure is difficult due to its size because of the lack of a continuous floor or roof framing system that would allow for the building to be braced together. The proposed disassembly and reassembly of the 1941 form would allow the applicant to construct a new foundation and perform other structural upgrades in a way that would be more simple in the long run. Back on April 26th, the chief building official, Dave Thacker, and our planning director, Gretchen Milliken, visited the site and did determine that they believed that the conditions of the structure did not require panelization. They believed that it would be able to survive lifting. And at this time, the director and the chief building official have not received any new information or observed any change in conditions that would alter their findings and determination. So tonight, staff is recommending that the board review the proposal for 1304 Park Avenue, conduct a public hearing, and deny the disassembly and reassembly of the landmark historic structure, subject to the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval outlined in the draft final action letter. At this time, staff has not received any public input on this project. And that concludes my presentation. I can land on the panelization plans if that's helpful.
I have a quick question. Aiden, could you just go over again what panels are going to be panelized? What sides are going to be panelized?
Yes,
On this
let
again?
me, luckily this is
Oh,
a PDF,
yeah,
so I
thank you.
can
That's
zoom in a
better.
bit.
Too, that-
So essentially here, the hatch structure is the original
House.
late 19th century building.
Hmm.
And then this portion was constructed right before 1941. So this will be panelized, disassembled, and then reassembled. And then the original historic form is proposed to be lifted. So we have 4 panels.
So what specifically are the 4 panels? There's the one on the front facade,
With the gable, right?
on the gable end. That one would be one of them. On the north, no, I guess it'd be the south.
This is
side.
the south elevation. Yes, the side elevation. You have 2 additional panels.
On the shed on the back would be panelized.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then the gable end on the south is part of the lift where it's got the cross hatching.
Yes, that's correct.
And then what about the north side?
This would become 1 panel.
That's the back.
No, that
No.
is
Is that the north
another
side?
side elevation.
Okay. And that'd be panelized.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the rear is non-contributing. It's a more recent addition, so that would be removed for the proposed addition.
I was a little bit confused because there was a discussion that there was a 1907 edition and a 1941 edition. Are there 3 editions or are there just 1 edition?
There was just 1 addition.
Could you circle the 1 edition that is 1907/19?
Well, there's been more current editions as well, Lola.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the original form 1907, I believe. Is the original building or 19?
Let me just make sure I get the exact 1885.
1885 is the rectangle, and that's the portion we're proposing to lift and to put to the side and then put back on a new foundation. Then there's the 41 edition, which all that's left of that is the 3 panels and the south side shed roof form panel. We're including in the panelization because it's fairly intact, but it has no rear wall. Everything to the east side is an addition that was done probably in the 1980s. And so that there's really no back of the building that's contributory. So you take the back of the building off, there's really not a whole lot to hold it together. There's a lot of work that would need to be done to tie it all together, where this approach takes the parts that are salvageable and in a reasonable fashion, we can put them aside and then reassemble. And this kind of falls along the discussion that we had during the last meeting of what the group was kind of kicking around if we picked the 1885 building as our work point. But, you know, I struggle with that because we could simply say that and then tear the rest of it down according to the kind of the theory that we've been going by on these other projects that we've approached. But the 41 edition is kind of contributory because it creates this gable form in the front, and it's the way that people perceive the building and see the building. So I think saving those panels, you know, has some value, and it represents the building that my client would like to save in total.
What evidence do we have that the gable end is 1941? Is it that we just know it was there by 1941?
The sand.
And I did read the minutes from last meeting,
Yeah.
by the way. I know I wasn't here, but I did read them.
Can you show the Sanborn, Aiden? That helps, I think.
So just to clarify, the 1907, circa 1907 was,
The mic right in, yeah.
yes, okay, thanks. The 1907 date was included in the report because that's the earliest Sanborn map that we have on this property. It was kind of a little bit outside of the bounds of the previous maps that were done. So we believe in former reconnaissance level surveys and intensive level surveys were done, is that there was this wing extension here, but that was replaced, which you can see internally, when the 1941 addition was completed on the, I believe this is the east and the north elevations of the home. So these are parts of the portions of the home that are proposed to be panelized, and then the original structure to be lifted.
So it was done sometime between 1929 and 1941.
Yes.
Okay, so it's just from the Sanborn maps. Okay. The siding that's on the south side of the original building, that's not.
None of that seems to be
Yeah.
original. The little shed addition.
The little shed
shape.
addition, the
and-
kind of
and then-
faux
Right.
kind of shingling look, and then the siding that was put on it, probably not even 50 years old.
Right. Yeah, it was, the house has been, renovated and messed around with over the years. In the 80s, quite a bit, with the addition up from the 41 Sanborn. It was extended even further back into the rear yard with an extension of the shed and then an extension of the gable form of the 41 addition on the north side. So yeah, it's been, and then it's most recently someone who was in there prior to the purchase by my client and was, starting to reframe it without permit.
So essentially, my understanding, and you can correct my understanding, which could be faulty, but essentially what you're saying is the rectangular form of the original 1885 building can be lifted, and you are going to lift it, but you're going to have to. So I went in there the other day, nobody was home, and there is no wall, kind of no wall in between the two forms of the.
On the north side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll have to be temporary, but the other three are in pretty good shape. They're there. So
Okay.
yeah, we think that that's a small enough form that we can brace it and lift it as a unit, as opposed to, well, you're in it. So you can see the kind of the complexities of trying to brace and lift these other pods that are attached to it. It gets a little cumbersome.
Okay.
So are you asking to panelize again, I can't read it quite from here. I probably should have brought my computer. It's panel D. So you're asking to panelize panel D? And isn't that just,
Yeah, well,
and
and that's sort of, well, because it's really the only other intact wall.
was it intact?
Well, we don't know because the siding is not original. And from the inside, it's covered with sheetrock. So until we do a full demo on it, I'm not sure, but it looks like it's intact. It's in as good a shape as
But
any
the
of other
siding's not.
intact ones. No, we're not going to keep the siding.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 That's just it's a hand split shake.
To lift the whole thing, what would you need to do?
You'd have to do a lot of extensive rebuilding on the inside of the house. And that just gets counterintuitive to lifting these things. You really want to make them as light as you possibly can. So to go in and create a lot of framing that would in the end be just throwaway to what end? I mean, if we save the walls that we're talking about from the 41 edition and the main body of the historic form from the 1885 building, I think we've done everything that you'd be able to do if you were to lift the whole thing as a unit. We're going to reframe the roof anyway. So really, what are you left with? We're going to reframe the roof. We're going to reframe the floor once it's down on a foundation. So,
Well, of course, the argument you're making is that would apply to every house in Old Town.
Well,
I mean, there's
and that's
nothing
a- that's a good
economical
point. That's
about
a- that's a
anything in
dis-
Old
that's-
Town, is
That's
there?
a discussion for another
Okay,
time
so
perhaps, but
I don't know
yeah,
if we
that-
want to go down that path, all right?
Not for the faint heart.
Yeah. What if, I guess where I was having, when I was looking at the site, I think, you've clearly got some historic siding, original siding on the front of the house.
right.
You do on the facade, I believe that's facade on the gable end on the Park Avenue side. I'm thinking it's closer to 1929 than it is 1941. It's got the right profile on it. In the same way on the north side of the building, you've got the same siding. I'm not sure if maybe a different, where we've got this addition off the back, you might have an intact wall of framing, but on the back addition, which is, I think, panel D, I'm not sure how contributing that panel D is to this whole structure in light of, I would rather see the historic form from 1895, the next historic form, which was built prior to 1941, lifted intact, and see that shed addition on the back just go away.
I would concur with that. As soon as I saw that shed form in my little walk through all alone, I thought that one, I was wondering why you were keeping it. So why don't you talk about that?
Really, we're just talking about the wall because there's no other element of that. The rear wall of the building is part of the non-contributory addition. And so really that was the only other panel that was left that represented, anything from the historic form that might be worth saving. So we pretty much just threw it into the mix.
But if with what I was just describing, would we be throwing anything away? Would you be discarding any framing if you just did the original 1895 house and the 1941 addition?
No,
Or
but there's no back.
1889. Thank
Yeah, there's no back wall to the 41 gable.
Mhm.
So, and there's really no interior wall because you probably walked through the shed portion of the building over into the gabled form, and there's no wall there. So,
But would
looked
you
at
be
as-
doing some kind of a structure? You have to be doing some kind of a structure in there anyway to support the new gable roof. And so why not just
Right.
build the new engineered structure as it is intended to be when it's finished? So you're just lifting up really a finished product and putting the finished product back down.
And that's what I would hope to avoid, actually, because that gets complicated with the weight of the structure. And it's better if we can do it as light as possible. Point in case, the house that fell in the hole on Park Avenue a few years back. And that,
Well, I think that was a kind of a different situation.
well, I think the bracing.
There was some wind blowing and there was a wing wall hanging out there not being supported.
Well, not Woodside, but the one on Park Ave was fully reframed in the air. And, because of that, it survived the fall, but it created quite a mess to clean up. And so from my experience, my recommendation would be to do this as light as possible and to put these, take the 1885 historic form and the other, if the south panel rake roof, shed roof form, is not contributory enough in your eyes to try to hold on to, then, let's just save the 41 addition, gabled end and north side and a little bit of south wall that represents, and take those and reapply those to a proper structure.
That window there, yes, that one, which is the historic form, do we even know?
So it looks like the original window opening was that vertical that we're seeing that was enclosed. So this panel is a part of the circa 1885. So it looks like that was replaced at some point prior to 1941.
You know, I do think if weight is really the issue here, and I'm not sure I agree with that. Okay. You know, if you're removing the material that's not historic already, I mean, like on that south wall, if you're removing that siding that's on the south wall already, if you're removing the roof already, because you're going to be redoing it and the shingles and everything else, then I'm having a heartburn a little bit over the removal or the panelization of that addition that took place sometime between 1929 and 1940 on the north side. Yeah. If you know, I would much rather see everything else being removed and see if we can't lift that up intact. That's my thought on it.
Well, let's open this up to the public to see if there's any input there, and then we can settle unless there's further questions from the board.
There's not for me. I went down and looked at it too, because I kept looking at the picture thinking there was a ghost window, and went down and sure, that type of thing. So it's, I just keep thinking we try to avoid panelization. And if we, historically, we have tried to avoid panelization. I'm just wondering if there's any way we could.
So, okay, so you have to put some kind of wall or structure on the left-hand side of the most historic rectangle in order to lift that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a little bit not understanding, and forgive me, but why can't you put a ghost wall on the right-hand side of the gables sort of shotgun house and lift that? I guess
The issue there with that side of the building is that there's no continuous floor. So we'd actually be framing floor through there too to try to stabilize it and connect it all together.
the joists look good though, that they were there.
Yeah, that's part of the non-permitted framing that had been done by the previous owner. But it's not connected to the historic form, the 1885 form. It's just floating out there on its own. So there'd have to be some contiguous members that ran through to kind of pull the whole thing together so that it didn't fall apart when it got lifted.
Given that, it's almost like a house of cards. And so what you're saying is that you would panelize the three sides of the gable form, and how if you did panelize that, how confident are you that you can re-erect it almost exactly as it is today?
Oh, very. I mean, I think there's plenty of evidence of that being done all over town. And those panels seem to be in pretty good shape. I mean, we still have to do a little bit of exploration in some areas, but they seem to be high enough out of the ground that there's not a lot of rot or any rot visible at the bases. So no, they're in pretty good shape.
And what's your time frame for doing all this?
Well, the owner would like to move forward with the building permit as soon as possible. We're ready to submit to the city for building permit. All the engineering's been done.
Well, it is tricky, so I'm kind of leaning towards approving the proposal.
It's this one's tough because I remember when we talked about it last time, because it's a little tricky. What we've talked about going to the Sanborn maps is we've allowed going back to a prior period, right? So if you look at can you put up the Sanborn maps again, Aiden? If we consider maybe going back to the 1929 historic form, that northern gable disappears, right? So the applicant wants to keep that what we're calling a non-historic structure, even though it was sometime between 1929 and 1941. And so that's where the meeting kind of drug out last week. Let's try to find some way to help them save that structure and meet somewhere in the middle, you know. And I know where I was last time, I was okay with that, as long as they're willing to and can, and you know, and work through the planning department to preserve that 1941 piece or 1929 to 41 piece, and then preserve the structure, the original historic structure per normal protocol. I was pretty good with that, and I still settled there. Both my fingers are crossed, which I don't like to be, but I know is kind of a balance in the middle, because again, they could go back to that 1929 Sanborn map and say, we want to recreate this structure as is, and based on how we've approached things before. If you could do that, in my opinion, that would be a loss to the community. So that's where I'm sitting or standing.
Yeah,
Another snowflake. Sorry.
no, I interrupted you.
Go ahead, John.
No, I mean, I struggle with that too. I think if we were being 100% consistent here, we would deny it, because the chief building inspector said that the home can be lifted, and that's what we've always fallen back on. But it's possible that in instances like this, that encourages the removal of historic material based on how we interpret other projects, and obviously we don't want to do that. So I struggle with that as well. I also, just to add on to that, I think that if the homeowner, and I think it's a good example, and this is all hypothetical, but wants to return, you know, if we have that reverse adverse effect that they tear off that side, don't rebuild it, that's, you know, it's a bummer from a historical perspective, but, you know, at the same time, the homeowner would have to live with that as well. So I think obviously the homeowner wants to preserve that area of the home is my assumption as well. They don't want to return the home to its original historic. So I fall back on, okay, they want to lift the whole thing. So, or they want to preserve the whole thing. So we need to lift the whole thing. So that's where I'm at.
I do want to just add, you know, if we're talking about, and Jonathan brought up that we very often go back to the situation of letting the property owner take and decide which historic period they want to go back to. But you have to live with that decision too. Right. And then you have to meet current code with that decision. And so, you know, often it's in the property owner's best interest to be keeping that later addition because of side yard setbacks and front yard setbacks and square footage. And so it's not like we're trying to take and go, oh, let's take and go back to the 1895 original addition house and then go, well, let's take this off, and but then they can put this back on again. We'd be going down a really slippery slope of trying to be consistent with how people are kind of manipulating the land management code and the design guidelines.
That's the point I was trying to make, which you made way more eloquently.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I think Jonathan, and you've been in front of us a number of times. I think you know that for the most part, we don't like panelizing. I know I don't. Mm-hmm. I think anytime we can do it, and that we can lift the structure that's meant to be kept, I think that's what we would all prefer to do. I know that's what I would prefer to do. I think there's instances where we've come across, and I think Lola thinks this is one of those instances where maybe it's better to panelize it. There was a house over on 9th Street, a little one-way street, and we went back in there and they got into it more. They were going to lift it, and then we got into it more and more, and they just really couldn't do it. And I think at that point, the chief building inspector, Dave, probably got back involved again, but it couldn't be lifted. I mean, right now, I think, you know, what we're hearing from the chief building official is that this can be lifted. And I don't know if he was, and we're even looking at this saying, you know, what I'm trying to propose is we're actually lifting a smaller version of that house, a less weighted version of that building as it sits. But that's where I stand on it right now.
Good point.
Did we have open?
I was just going to say, let's open this up for public input? Do we have anybody out there in?
We do have Dave Thacker on the line.
We have who?
Dave.
Our chief building official.
Oh, that would be, I think,
Yeah.
very, very good to hear his assessment from his own lips.
Okay. Dave, I promoted you to panelist if you see that. Other than that, we only have, we don't have any hands raised.
So is Dave available to give us his input on his expertise on this?
Yeah, he hasn't accepted the promote to panelist. So I'm asking him to unmute right now. You can click a button that says that. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's seeing that. So, okay. But for public input, there currently is none. He could join in though on your further discussions.
Okay, well, any other discussion points? Should we just kind of get a temperature gauge while we're waiting?
I can just add, I did view the property together with Dave when we looked at it, and I think it's a difficult one. It's definitely like a heavier structure when you're trying to move, and some of these facades don't exist anymore, so you'd be kind of recreating facades in order to lift it. But we also looked at the site, and it's a pretty flat site, and there's quite a lot of space like for staging and things in the backyard. So that also came into the decision that we didn't want it to be panelized, because we felt like the site could be was complementary when you're on these kind of steep slopes or ones that are really difficult to get to. But this site is pretty easy to access and has space on the different side. So I don't know if Dave is going to join us or not, but he could probably add on to that.
Hi, Dave.
Hey there. Sorry, I'm technologically challenged today. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, and sorry for not getting right on. Let me turn on my camera as well. Sorry, it's not letting me. Okay, so the technological challenges remain. I apologize. I'll echo what Gretchen mentioned as we went out and we looked at the site. It is flat. There is a substantial amount of room, and although the structure is a little bit hodgepodge, if you will, it did seem like it was one that could be put together to a point of lifting and secured to the point that we could lift it and secure it in place. So that's where the determination came from, and that's kind of where we landed. And I think that compared to some of the others that we've lifted, this one seemed like a little bit easier, even in some aspects. So that's where we made our determination from.
Great, thanks, Dave. All right, do we need more discussion? You want to take temperature, or you want to just get to a motion?
I just want to ask Dave one question. Dave, are you still there? It's Lola.
Yes.
So what did you think about how did you appraise the fact that the floor is not connected to the rest of the house, that the bracing that's in the gable area is not tied in. What did you think should be done to mitigate that? And did you think it was possible?
That's a great question. As memory serves, I think what the considerations we had made as we looked at that and discussed it is, even though the floor is not, perfectly connected, there are ways to go ahead and secure that, to be able to get that lift and then be able to secure it to a foundation afterward. So, I think it will take a little bit of additional preparatory work prior to the lift, but it still seems as though it's a reasonable and possible activity.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I realize we still need to close the public hearing, so we'll close that. Puggy, do you have questions or
No, I think the
comments at all?
opinion was pretty clear.
Okay. Doug, did you have some more?
I have a question for John. To be respectful of your client and the time involved and how much it takes to get here. If we were to vote on what you've proposed tonight, and if it were denied, then we're delaying you again further. So if what we've been talking about and what, of lifting the two together, but not the shed on the back, removing some of the material off of it, if that's something you believe you and your client could live on, would that be a proposal that we could make tonight and keep you moving forward?
Well, that would be great. Yeah, I think that would be, so that would be, in effect, but the panel would go away.
The panel D would go, right. So we'd have to be making some, as part of this motion, we'd have to be doing something where we're also allowing for the removal of that material, that possibly historic material, at least give the planning staff an opportunity to make those decisions. I'm not sure if that was even historic material anyway. Yeah, so it'd be panel D, and actually even the side of where you're looking in the crosshatch here, that historic form lifted, where it doesn't have a panel but between panel C and panel D, that's not historic material on that siding. So why we would have to approve that being removed. I believe.
So when you make your motion, you can just add in that information, and then it will be part of the public record, and that will be put into the.
Now, I'm confused. That hatched piece right there
Right.
is
Of the centerpiece?
I thought that was historic.
No.
It's part of the historic form, but it's not historic material, and it's a siding that maybe came around even maybe not even 50 years ago.
I see.
Yeah, and panel D,
It's the shed.
is the shed, and that wasn't either. So, what that would do is that if that material can come off, then that gives the architect contractor the ability to take and put some sheeting on that wall to help in the lift, and reframe it and have it, facilitate that.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'll work with staff to update the preservation plan diagram for reflect the approval again.
So how do we walk this through? Do we make a motion on what's in front of us first? Or do we talk about what we're willing to compromise on as it relates to panel D, the crosshatch area on the south side? And is there another wall?
It'd be just panel D and the cross.
Yeah.
Those are the only
Yeah.
two.
Okay.
I think we have to deny panelization and then say another motion to what Doug was just saying.
Yeah, no, I think you can make a motion that you deny the panelization, and then add on whatever, that you're okay with removing the shed form from that from the lifting.
Lift.
In order to create a frame, the ability to lift the entire building.
Correct, yeah. So I think you just do it all in one motion, but
Yeah.
you start with denying the panelization because that's what you've been asked to do tonight, either to approve it or to deny it.
Do we need to approve the lift?
No.
No, okay.
Want to make the motion?
I can do the first part of it, but I didn't take
Trying to
notes
find
on
it
what the
for
rest
you.
of it was.
Okay, so I'll try it. Okay, I move to deny the disassembly and reassembly,
Panelization.
1304 Park Avenue, partial disassembly and reassembly. However, I also move to allow the removal of panel D, as in dog, in order to facilitate the lifting of the entire historic form at 1304 Park Avenue, including the 1885 form and the 1907/29 form. According to the
29/41.
29/41.
2941. I should play those odds. Anyway, according to the
Findings of fact
findings of fact and conclusions of law
And,
and conditions and approval.
and conditions of approval.
and also allow them to remove the siding material on the historic.
Furthermore, I decree. Furthermore, I move that they be allowed to remove the non-historic material from is it the north side, south side?
South side.
South side of the building in order to facilitate the lifting of the entire historic.
Perfect.
Second. Oh, no, let Doug do it second.
I'll second that. Very well done.
We've got
Very well done.
Queen Lola.
Lola with the motion, Doug with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your careful consideration.
Yeah.
Not what you wanted to
And you're
hear,
thoughtful
but
for-
somewhere it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll
Thanks,
make it work.
Jonathan.
You can at least get back to work. You can at least get back to work on this now.
Thanks, John. Sorry, I just wanted to stand.
All right, moving to the next agenda item.
It's always on.
Park Avenue.
Okay.
Nice work, Lola.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so tonight I'm presenting the proposal from 517 Park Avenue for a material deconstruction for a portion of the rear facade. 517 Park was constructed in circa 1888 and is listed as a landmark site on Park City's historic sites inventory. Here's a photo of the structure from the early 1970s. The applicant is proposing to remove 32 square feet of historic material in order to accommodate a rear second level deck addition to the structure. So here the applicant's representative, architect Caitlin, has provided this diagram outlining for you all these sections of material that are proposed to be removed. Staff did complete a site visit to determine existing historic material. And it does appear that much of the historic siding was removed during an extensive 1993 addition. I outlined that in the packet. I didn't include it in my proposal, but essentially in 1993, the Episcopal Diocese of Utah wanted to demolish the site. They were, or the structure, they were the owners. And with the help of the Historic District Commission, the city was able to sort of persuade them to sell the property to a local contractor who renovated the structure and did remove a significant portion of historic material. I'm going to go to the next slide that shows the proposed rear addition. The southwestern section of the property that it is proposed for this shed addition to be modified. However, when staff completed a site visit, the contractor removed the interior of the wall, and we were able to see that there was no historic material underneath the new siding that was put up in 1993, 1994, and with input from our historic preservation consultant that I provided as an exhibit, we're able to determine that the only material that this proposal will destroy that was historic is the second story deck addition, which you can see here. This will be the northwestern rear facade where the deck is proposed to be constructed. As part of the approval tonight, prior to issuance of a building permit for any material deconstruction work, the planning department will review the proposal for compliance with the design guidelines for historic residential sites in the land management code. This project has already been to our design review team, and the deck has been found to be consistent with the design guidelines for historic residential sites. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Historic Preservation Board approve the material deconstruction of a portion of the rear facade of the landmark historic structure located at 517 Park Avenue. And at this time, we have not received any public input. That concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to land on any slide or pull up a portion of the report that stuck out to you all if that's necessary.
Great, thanks, Hayden. Any further additions from what Hayden presented?
The square footage that's removed will be used to repair other locations in the house.
Yeah, so that was Kyle, the contractor, Kyle Hedman. He was saying that the square footage that we're removing from the back portion, that there's basically 2 rows of siding, will be used to patch anywhere else we need to.
Caitlin,
and this is
for the record, can you just state your name?
Yeah, I jumped in with Kyle instead of myself. Caitlin Barhorst, applicant representative. And yeah, and the deck is also going to be offset from the basically north elevation about 2 feet to comply with the addition guidelines. And yeah, we're pretty excited about the project. Jeff is using the Utah rehabilitation tax credits for this project, so it's pretty great. Yeah,
awesome, great.
Well, don't go away too far. I think we need to come up with some reason to put you on the hot seat on this one. Okay. Now, is this going to become a party deck? Is that the idea?
Honestly,
just kidding.
So I'm the applicant, Jeff Love. Honestly, the primary reason for the deck is more to screen interline condo behind the house. The home is essentially, it's 3 stories, but primarily 2 stories. The main living area and the master bedroom will be on the primary level, and the deck will help screen from any rear windows. It's interlines, and I lived in interlines, so I can badmouth it, but it's not very attractive from the east looking west. So that will help hide it a little bit, along with some other landscape mitigation we plan to do.
And we're actually right now it's like 4 separate apartments that were done in the 94 kind of, that's been that for a while. So we're bringing it back to single family.
So when
single family house converted to 4 apartments, probably in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then Tim Lee renovated it in 92, 93, kept it as 4 apartments, and it was actually affordable housing for 10 years.
Yeah,
but taking it back to its original roots.
So we're looking at the panelization of 32 feet. Do we need to consider lifting or? No. Any questions for the applicant? Any folks? Okay. Let's open this up for public input. Do we have anybody jumping in? Aiden?
No hands.
Okay, we'll close public input. Well, team, what do you think?
100% I support
Yeah,
it.
me too.
I have no problem.
I have neighbor looking in my window issues already.
All right. Well, we know what to do. Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
off the hook. I
Can we
don't
do
want
one
to
thing
stop.
first? Do we have a city attorney here tonight? Is Mark here?
No, Mark is not attending that. I'm doing my best.
You're doing your best.
Yes.
So can we go to page 131
Yes.
in the pack? I'm going to waste some time here, but we've got 10 minutes. Because I wish Mark were here.
Oh, okay.
131.
130.
Oh, there's the mark.
Maybe Peggy can read it. Or you want to hand it to me and I'll.
Oh, is Mark's in here, isn't he?
Yeah, there it is. City Attorney Carter
Introduce Mark
introduced.
Harrington.
Mark
He was a
Harrington.
law student.
The
Who
University
is
of
a law
Washington, right?
student at the University of Washington.
Wow, I did not catch that.
You didn't catch
Wow.
that.
That's what we were talking about. There
Yeah.
was-
And he has been working in the Park City Legal Department this summer.
So he was a summer intern.
Wow. Yeah, he always talks about, but that's how he started. Mark has been working on the proposed ordinance and process for the demolition of historic structures.
So it started back with him.
It really did.
And this will be in
Yeah.
the minutes, so he'll get a grin out of that. Now, there were some real ghosts that were in these.
He really is.
I know.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, it was blast from the past.
Yeah, way too much.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm also glad you read most of those. I included a lot of information.
So I have no problem with this.
Motion,
Okay, yeah.
if you're ready?
Yep.
I move that we approve the partial material deconstruction of the landmark historic structure at 517 Park Avenue, subject to the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and conditions of approval outlined in the draft final action letter. Is that right?
Second.
All right, John Hutchings with the motion, Puggy Holmgren the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Nicely done. Yeah, thank you. All right,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second that.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, great.
Caitlin, you can't leave without a hug.